Hello and welcome to a new Carbon tutorial. In here I want to show you how you can improve your shot setup, make it faster and more robust. Let's talk about a very common problem. You have your avatar, which is usually provided in A or T pose with the garments on them, but your shot starts with a completely different pose. Your pose might be somewhere in space and probably rotated in a different character pose. So let me show you what's in this scene. I have my character here on first frame, and then my actual shot starts with character being somewhere up here, and I've set up the character to animate from our A pose to our shot starting pose over 10 frames. Let's go and simulate it. All right, here we are. Let me scroll through this slower. So the character immediately takes off and our cloths start lagging behind. And then as they start springing back and swinging around, it kind of stabilizes a little bit. And then at frame 10, we stop the animation. And obviously here at frame 11 now, our cloths still have momentum and they overshoot and have a lot of momentum still going on, but the character doesn't move anymore. And so they spring up and move around, and then eventually they settle down. But we end up in a situation where this does not look pretty anymore. Our tank top is not supposed to ride up here. It's supposed to still be over the skirt, similarly to what it was in the first frame, as we can see here. So now how can we deal with this? Well, the first obvious solution would be to extend our animation to go from at least 10 to, let's say, 50 frames for the animation, or maybe hundreds, depending on how far away your setup is and how contorted your character is. 50 frames lead up for maybe only a 200 frame shot is really expensive and slows down iteration time as well. So here we really need to see if we can make it work in 10 frames only, and then maybe give it another 10 frames to settle. All right, let's get started. We want to make sure our garments keep up with the character motion. And the motion is comprised as linear and angular velocity. Obviously, we have our linear one go from here to here, and our angular velocity where the character spins around and is rotated facing the other way. Well, how can we inject part of this momentum, part of these velocities into our cloth? Good thing is we have a carbon node that does exactly this. It's called the Carbon Kinetic Drive, which can be found here in our shelf, or if you go to the Carbon menu, under Carbon Effects, you can see Kinetic Drive right here. I've created one now, and we can see the parameters. Let me just explain to you a little bit more what it exactly does. The Kinetic Drive is an effect node, and it drives a carbon cloth from an actor or a collider. Here in our dropdown, we have a collider. It generates forces such that the carbon cloth's points are encouraged to match a driving object's linear and angular velocity. So here our driving object, and our soft is our skirt. And it takes the linear and angular velocities and turns it into forces that will be applied to the soft. Now, you might not want to take all of the force, but actually only inject part of it. And this is what the ratio slider is for. 0 to 1, so 0% to 100% can be injected. The default is 0.1. Let me reset it. Now let's also create a second kinetic drive, because we obviously have not only the skirt, we also have the tank top. I'm going to create it from the menu here, from the shelf. And in here, again, we only have one collider, and now we need to make sure to select the tank top. Now, you probably already have noticed there's a parameter called point group. What this allows you is to have only a subset of your cloth points being affected by the kinetic drive. So this could be if you have a code that also has a long dangling piece, you might want to affect the dangling piece when a character swings, but the rest of the code does not have that much circular force around it, and you don't need to necessarily affect it with a kinetic drive, but you want the long dangly piece to be affected. So that would be one example where you would select a subgroup of your cloth to be affected, but in this case we do not need it. Also, as a side note, you can have multiple kinetic drives affect the same cloth. So if you want to apply 50% here and 20% here and so on for a garment, that's possible as well. But in this case, we keep it simple. All of the points, which is marked by either leaving this empty or setting to an asterisk, does the same thing right now. All of the points of the soft are being affected by our collider. Now, next up, let's think about it. When do we want it to affect our cloth? Well, only really during the transition. So frame 1 to here, once the transition is done. We do not want it to be affected afterwards. We want our cloth to move freely without the kinetic drive. How can we remove the kinetic drive after that? Yes, correct. Activation. First we keep activation to 1 and then we set it to 0 when we do not need it anymore. Now obviously the starting frame is frame 1. We want to keep it at 1. So let's just set a key at 1 for both. Okay, now we have our starting frames with a key. When do we want to turn it off? That is the next question. Well, our animation here goes from 1 till 10, still moves, and then going from 10 to 11 is when it stops moving. So we have our change in velocity from 1 to 0. So we do not want the kinetic drive to already turn off here because we still have a change in velocity. The change in velocity of our character stops here, 11 to 12. Nothing changes in between here. So we should set our kinetic drives to turn off when nothing changes anymore on the avatar between frames. So first frame range where nothing changes is 11 to 12, not 10 to 11, because again, it goes from here full speed to nothing. All right, so let's set our keyframes at 12. Go back to our kinetic drive, set our key, and actually make it 0. All right. Now let's go back to 12 for the other one, 0 and set key. All right, perfect. But we're actually not quite done yet because activation is an integer. Let me show you what this looks like if you go to Windows, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor. And if I select the two activation parameters, you can see there's actually a curve on it, which is automatically created. So with this curve and you have integer parameters, it actually rounds. So once you fall past this 0.5 line, which happens somewhere here, frame 6, 5. So at frame 7, you're going to end up below 0.5 and activation will be rounded down to 0, which means we would actually turn off the kinetic drive too early. We do not want this. So select all of these points, then go up to this option shelf and select this option, which is called step tangents, and it looks like a step as well. So let's click on it, and here we go. We keep everything at 1, and then on frame 12, in an instant, it jumps to 0. So let's press Ctrl S to save the scene, reset the simulation, and let's run it. And if we scrub, we can see it follows better, and there's still a little bit too much motion in it. So probably our ratio is too small. So let's bring it up, to 0.5. And the other one as well, 0.5. Reset the simulation, let's run it again. And that looks much better. Let's look at it slowly. We start here, and we can already see a big difference in the beginning. It's not lagging behind, the straps are not coming off the shoulder, it nicely follows along, it spins with the character. And then here we are at frame 12, it stops. And now the kinetic drive turns off. You can see this has changed from normal color to yellow. And the cloth just simulates under normal conditions without being constrained by the kinetic drive. Give it a few frames and it has settled down. And this one has settled beautifully back with the tank top over the skirt. No issues here. The front all looks great. And then from now on, obviously your shot would have an animation that goes here. I do not have an animation, but the avatar might do whatever they do. So walk or dance or jump. Yeah. This is how we go in 10 frames plus a little bit time to settle down, maybe another 5 to 10 frames from our start pose that is very different to the first pose of our shot. I hope this made sense and I hope it helps you improve your workflow. Thank you for watching.